What happens when a country is not at war, but its government or its state is slowly falling apart? Lebanon has been called a failed state, a fragile state, even a cautionary tale. But none of these labels quite explain what's really going on. Today, on this episode of The Diplomat, we are talking about how or what's really happening in Lebanon right now, and how outside pressure, internal politics, and public exhaustion have shaped a crisis that is harder to define than it is to ignore. My guest is Dania Caraisi. She is a political scientist, a senior fellow at the new Layinz Institute, and someone who's been studying civil society and how Lebanese leaders and citizens navigate a system built on ambiguity, compromise, and survival. We get into Hezbollah, US and Israel pressure, and what the idea of sovereignty even means when your country's future is being shaped by actors inside and outside your borders. Thank you for being with us, Dania. Welcome. Let's talk about the Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, and his position on Hezbollah. He gave quiet signals to the United States and also to Saudi Arabia that Hezbollah's reach will be contained specifically in the south of the Litani River. But at the same time, he was giving reassurances to Hezbollah and Hezbollah's leaders in Lebanon that the weapons of Hezbollah would remain untouched elsewhere. How do you describe that? Is that kind of double positioning or just politics being played in Lebanon, or did it mark a real shift of how Lebanese politics, how Lebanese presidents, how the Lebanese government would manage regional expectations?
Yes, so I think Aoun is trying to Aoun understand the challenges of disarming Hezbollah, and based on those challenges, he's trying to balance and be diplomatic in his approach. And what I mean by diplomatic, he's trying to meet the Americans' demands and interests and requirements in terms of like disarming Hezbollah, but at the same time trying to avoid a civil war in Lebanon, because we do understand that disarming Hezbollah is not an easy, simple, straightforward operation. It requires balancing a lot of demographic characteristics in Lebanon, but also the Lebanese armed forces. So I think he's trying to balance both. Right now, it looks like the Americans are extremely frustrated and mad with how the situation is going, given that we have recent report that Hezbollah is arming itself again, building its capabilities again. The Lebanese government is definitely aware about this. This is information that is published online. It's accessible. The Lebanese armed forces has also information about the capacity of Hezbollah and how many fighters there are. But what can they do?
Many would see that positioning, the positioning of the Lebanese president, is that he's playing both sides. How do you see that? Or is this just survival in a system, in the Lebanese system that is already fragmented?
Definitely, the Lebanese system is fragmented. I think this is putting the Lebanese government in a very risky situations from the Americans, and the way they are dealing from the Americans and how the Lebanese government is taking it seriously. I don't think he's playing both sides. I think Aoun and the prime ministers are very clear toward disarming Hezbollah, but they know the challenges that comes with this. We know that Hezbollah currently still control a large portion of the parliament, still have a very strong control over mass populations. And so any decisions by the government to disarm or send the military troops will really be faced with serious unrest. They have the guns, they have the powers that really exceed what the capability and the capacity of the Lebanese armed forces. And so given those challenges, we need to be more like realistic with our expectations and what can and we cannot achieve. I think something that we need to talk about it here when it comes to what the government is doing and what is really is trying to do is the Americans have capacity and have resources to leverage the Israelis to kind of stop their military operations given the ceasefire agreement. The Israelis are still bombing Lebanese cities. I understand that some of these operations targeting Hezbollah officials and sites, but some of them are also targeting civilians. And I think if the Israelis can a little bit step back and maybe take us some break on those attacks, maybe their own will have more capacity to pressure Hezbollah to disarm itself and just give up its guns. Something also I think it's important to mention here is our discussed plan to integrate Hezbollah within the Lebanese armed forces and to put its guns within the Lebanese armed forces. I personally do not think this is a good idea. We have examples from other countries where this failed for different reasons. Putting Hezbollah with a very military and ideology that is very different of the Lebanese armed forces within the Lebanese armed forces is definitely going to lead to a further fragmentation within the system. So this is definitely not a good idea. But I think we have to be realistic. So what we cannot achieve.
Between the continuous bombing, as you mentioned, in the south, and this strategy that Aoun is using between giving both sides reassurances, is this strategy would give the Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, or does it give Lebanon some breathing room, or it will just delay a harder decision that Lebanon has to take in the current situation, in the current atmosphere in the region?
It's definitely not giving Lebanon any break. It's definitely leading to further frustrations from the Americans. And now the Israelis are threatening for another operations in Lebanon. So this is a short answer to the question. Why? For different reasons. I think the Israelis have two policy options right now. They can respond to what's going on in Lebanon by, yes, declaring another military operations, or, which what Owen recently said, and I think it's a better option for the Israelis right now, maybe engage in a direct conversations with the Lebanese officials or governments. Maybe we need to have a conversation on the tables, because constantly using guns and weapons to disarm Hezbollah is likely not producing a good result. So maybe we have, primarily for the Israelis, and also the Lebanese are absolutely not ready for another military operations. And so it's definitely not giving us a break, but maybe it's an opportunity for the Israelis to engage in different policy options. And maybe here, I'm going to go back and say what recently Aoun have said. Maybe we need to have a direct negotiations with them. And this is something the Americans have welcomed very much.
Between no breathing rooms, as you mentioned, and the public statements that we've listened and heard and seen out of Washington, out of the U.S. envoy to Lebanon, Tom Barak, calling Lebanon a failed state, warning also about Hezbollah's presence, but there has not been real or direct escalation so far. This kind of language about pressure, how is it seen, do you think? Is it just about pressure, or is it about preparing the public for something else? Because we are hearing some stories and rumors about a second wave of a war.
Right. It's both. The short answer, it's both. I think Lebanon is a failed state for different reasons. But yes, economically, we are a failed state. We all have a fragmented system. I think this statements primarily aim to pressure the Lebanese government to take serious actions to disarm Hezbollah. But I also to threaten them that another war is possible if you do not take a serious actions. But something the Americans are missing, and here it's clear to highlight, is what we can and we cannot do as a Lebanese governments, right? When the government of Lebanon voted on the disarming of Hezbollah, we had unrest in the Lebanese streets. People were on the streets holding guns, holding weapons. So there is a serious civil war. And so what we cannot do, it does not mean like we're not taking it seriously. It means the government has a limited capacity to actually do what they can do. And so here, I think the Americans have to pressure the Israelis again to, if they're not willing to withdraw from these 5 territories in Lebanon, at least stop the constant bombing, so then they can pressure Hezbollah to actually put its guns, because Hezbollah is still using the same paper that they're attacking us. Why are you asking us to give up our weapons when they are attacking us nonstop? So maybe this requires another approach from the Americans and also the Israelis. Definitely, it's concerning right now what's going on in Lebanon.
So what you're trying to say is the continuous bombing of some parts of southern Lebanon is being used as a strategy by Hezbollah?
Yeah, it's being used as a justification by Hezbollah to keep its gun, by really replying and saying we are continuously they're attacking us, and the Lebanese armed forces does not have the capability to protect us. So what are you expecting from us? To give up our weapons when we don't have any sort of protections? And so we want to take off this paper from them. We want to be like, there's no any attacks. They're respecting the ceasefire plan. So why would you keep it? Let the Lebanese government be in charge. And I think this is something that the Americans have the power to do, to engage in those direct conversations with the Israelis. And I think if the Americans are not willing to engage in those conversations, we understand now why Aoun have recently called for direct negotiations with the Israelis, because we want to be clear with them that we're trying to do this and we're trying to disarm this Hezbollah, but we have serious concerns in our country, in our community, but we also have serious concerns from your side.
This is a breakthrough that for a Lebanese president to call for direct negotiations or conversations with the Israelis. How is that seen in Lebanon, and how do you think that would be seen by foreign actors that a Lebanese president is actually willing to engage with the Israelis for the first time?
So I want to start answering the second portion. So according to my U.S. foreign sources, high-level sources, we know how the Israelis are responding to these calls. I've received some informations about that. So currently the Israelis are divided. One portion of the Israelis welcome this call to have a direct negotiations with the Lebanese community, especially the Aoun is coming from a background that is a very reformist, very liberal, very open-minded. On the other hand, we have another group of the Israelis are a little bit skeptical about these calls because they still perceive the Lebanese government as a failed state. There is a fragmented, as well as still control all the institutions. So there is right now kind of a debate on the Israelis whether to engage in these conversations or not. I think it's important to highlight something here. Calling for a direct negotiation is not normalization. And I think right now, when everybody heard Aoun talking about direct negotiations, they started calling him like, you're not really respecting our values, our norms, where we stand with Israel. I think direct negotiation is different in political science and foreign policy. We have data that shows we still have a high tension in Lebanon toward Israel. I don't think normalization with Israel right now is a good idea or good decisions. I think we do need these negotiations, but these negotiations does not mean normalizations. We need to stop the violence. We need to stop the war, and we need to create some sort of stability in this country. I don't know about the future, if normalization would be another option on the table. I don't think right now it's a good option, but I don't know about the future, how it will look. So definitely the people did not welcome that in Lebanon, just to mention, because they confuse the word of normalizations and direct negotiations.
Thank you for this clarification. It's a very important nuance to explain. But these messages or these statements that Lebanon is a failed state, how much of it do you think has shaped, for instance, the statement by the Lebanese president? So how much are these statements aiming at shaping Lebanon's domestic conversation about what's going to happen rather than really changing the facts on the ground?
I think it's definitely created the public alert in Lebanon that we need to do certain policies. We need to change how we are dealing. I think there's a public right now concerns, but I'm always concerned about Lebanon because we always hear these statements about like Lebanon is a failed state. The public in Lebanon got mad, get frustrated, but we don't really continue into an actual policies. So I think I'm hoping to see consistencies in how we react to this, like in the financial and like monetary policies, and have serious reforms. Until right now, for example, we have not really engaged in a real conversation with the World Bank or the IMF to actually sign on a reform programs for our banking system. We're still trying to manage the losses that we have in the Syrian banks and the losses that the Syrians have in our banks because of the financial crisis. So I feel like these statements create like a short-term crisis alert in Lebanon. Like, why are you calling us a failed state? But it fails to produce really consistent actions and policies and reforms in Lebanon. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping we can really kind of engage. But until now, we are not really engaged in a serious reforms in the banking systems. Hence, the Americans and, frankly, the international community perceived as a failed state. And we still do not have a serious investments from foreign actors or Gulf actors as well in Lebanon.
Between these terminologies or terms or messages that Lebanon is a failed state, or these public statements about Lebanon, there's also this word that keeps coming up in Lebanese politics about sovereignty, but it's become also a loaded term. For some, it means independence or full independence from foreign actors. For others, it means choosing the right alliances. In your view, and also in what you have gathered from your sources, what does sovereignty actually mean in Lebanon right now, or what it would mean in Lebanon for Lebanon in the future, and who gets to define it?
I think the Americans want the Lebanese government to define sovereignty. The short answer to that question. I think Aoun and Nawaf Salam, their policies and their decisions signal that sovereignty is the control of the Lebanese government and the Lebanese institutions on its territories. And the reason I'm saying this is because we have seen the recent decisions to end the UNIFIL power and actors in south of Lebanon, right? They're not gonna, in a few years, they're leaving Lebanon, and I think this is a decisions by the Americans, but also by the Lebanese government. They welcome that, right? To have the Lebanese armed forces fully in charge of South Lebanon. So this is a first. Another signaling that this is really how we define sovereignty is the Americans recently invested in Lebanon $230 million just to build and to support the Lebanese armed forces. This also means that we want one sole security actor in Lebanon, that is the Lebanese government. And so I think the Americans and the current government in Lebanon really want to define it on that approach. And I think all the policies and the signals that we see looks like this is the approach of we define sovereignty. I think the old periods of having the Syrians defining it or having other actors defining it, it's gone. So especially with the fall of the Assad regime.
So between the sovereignty and between being neutral, are these two can coincide or coexist together? Can Lebanon realistically stay neutral, or is that idea already off the table?
It's a very good question. I think it's difficult, and I think this requires really trying to make sure the decision is in the hand of the government. This requires, for example, the Palestinians that exist in Lebanon to disarm them and really have issues of Palestinian refugees have been resolved. This requires also the Syrian refugees have been resolved, because the fact that we have a large number of Syrian refugees inside Lebanon really kind of put pressures on what the government can and cannot say when it comes to the Syrian crisis. Same with the Palestinians. I know when October 7th happened, there was pressures on the Lebanese government to take position on the October 7th. We tried not to take positions. We tried to be neutral, not to engage, but it's difficult. Why? Well, because we have a large portion of those Palestinians inside our government. We have Hezbollah, who sometimes use, and many times actually use, the Lebanese borders to position us. So it's hard. It requires really ending all these non-state actors inside the government, which I think, recently there has been calls about disarming the Palestinians. It's difficult.
But what do you mean? You caught me off guard when you said there are some Palestinians in the government. What does that mean?
Well, I meant to say the government, there has been some talks currently about ending and disarming and the Palestinians' weapons, like the Palestinians' camps, right? And so the fact that we have representatives inside the government that still support the Palestinians' camps to exist in Lebanon and to have their guns and their weapons, this puts pressures on what can and cannot do the government.
So there are so many ideas that and factors that would be at play, either helping or being a hindrance to Lebanon being either neutral or sovereign, or having even the platform to do more reforms. You mentioned the IMF and the World Bank are still waiting for some reforms to happen. With the elections approaching, is there still space for actors or candidates who have the reform in mind, who are reform-minded actors, or has the window closed for that?
I think that's a very good question. I think there are potentials. We are hearing potentials for reformers and like youth actors to actually join the election. I think one element I want to add to that question, I think the election is a very good opportunity to see if Hezbollah still has the popular support that he used to have long time ago, before the war. I think it's important not only to disarm Hezbollah military, but also to remove the popular support of Hezbollah. And I think this is a good point to see if we can actually achieve that. Because currently Hezbollah does not have the means to support Lebanon or to support its community. And if we can actually remove Hezbollah from the politics and from the elections, this opened the opportunity for other Shias community who have this reform mindset and who want to be actually supporting their community instead of having Hezbollah. So I think this is a very good question. And if Hezbollah can be out of the election, then you have a vacuum for other reformers, particularly from the Shia community who actually want to lead the Shias and support and represent their community.
So to talk about the pressures, U.S. policy, and is it a pressure or is it a partnership? Washington face a choice: push too hard, as some would say that we're listening to these statements from envoys. If they push too hard, probably it could collapse what's left of Lebanon's state, but back off, and you will lose influence to other actors, to China probably, or to Russia, or to Iran in the region. Or let corruption and how Lebanon is a failed state has been described, and also paralysis deepen in the system. What do you think a smarter U.S. approach looks like right now? What did you hear from your sources from U.S. foreign policy or about U.S. foreign policy that the best U.S. approach should be or should look like right now?
I think my current sources is we know we have high-level officials going to Lebanon next week. The current approach is United States is going to continue to pressure the Lebanese government to really disarm Hezbollah, to take this seriously. My recommendation or my policy approach on this is I think the Americans should be realistic on what we can do, and continuing to pressure the Lebanese government without really addressing the challenges that we are facing is less likely to take us where we want to go. So the pressure without really listening to us and to listen to what the government wants, it's very hard to take us where to go. And I think it's important to know the challenges that we are facing. And this requires sitting on the table and listening to us on what's going on.
One of my guests last week on the Diplomat, on the show, Jonathan Katz, he's an expert in democracy decline and anti-corruption. We talked about Lebanon, and he mentioned how the civil society in Lebanon is really strong despite how the state is collapsing. So should U.S. support the shift from political elites that's been given for years to civil society and technocrats? What do you think? What are your sources telling you about this?
You probably know that all my research is about civil society. So I'm a big fan of civil society. I'm a very, very strong supporter. Yes, so I am a big fan of civil society organizations. And at countries like Lebanon, when you have a failed state, and it is what it is, I call things as they are, you must support other existing actors. And in this case, civil society. Civil society organizations in Lebanon tend to have a very high trust from foreign actors, from international actors. They trust us. When the poor explosion happened, most of the funds that we got to rebuild at least the cities and the people that lost were to civil society. Nothing was sent to the government. And it's fine. We understand that. People do not trust the government. We are a corrupt government. It is what it is. We have history of corruptions. So maybe we should definitely engage in civil society actors to actually rebuild public trust. But I want to say something else here. And I want to refer to something recently I've heard about it. Hezbollah was able to gain support from the Shia because he was able to offer what the Lebanese government did not offer: services, goods, money, opportunities, and money. We get this. This is true. The civil society in Lebanon has an opportunity to really offer the Shia and support them and gain their support and undermine Hezbollah. Because the government is not trustful, because people do not trust the government, so I totally get it. Let's use another actor to actually gain support for them and further disarm Hezbollah and further really reduce the public support for Hezbollah. And it is civil society organizations. And those civil society
you're mentioning something very important. If we give money to any actors or organizations that is actually in parallel with the government, right? We've seen this happening before. That's why we've seen previous parties in the civil war, because they had built a parallel society with money and settlements and payments. When we want right now the foreign actors or partners to give to the civil society, how much are we recreating the same mistake over and over again?
So when we talk about civil society, I think we have to be very clear. Civil societies could be part of political parties operating, which is what Hezbollah really has. Here, what I'm talking about civil society that have proved and have received funding from the U.S. administrations before and have proved like a clear records. So we have existing number of civil society that have a very good records of really reporting back to the agencies on how they have spent the money and where the money have went. And this is primarily what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about civil societies that operate under existing political parties that really try to distribute their agendas. USAID which right now it's ended, but like previously USAID has had a list of all the civil societies that have really good connections, have really distributed the money correctly. They have a transparency record. So we can use these resources to actually build what the south of Lebanon without using the Iranians' money, without using the Hezbollah money, further creating popular support for the civil society and undermining the popular support for Hezbollah, because we don't want Hezbollah to be in the government again. I think this is very important, because what are we trying to achieve if Hezbollah again is in the government, again blocking the government's decision to disarm itself? How can you want to win the elections right now and you don't want it to be in the election, in the government? So I think this is an opportunity for us.
I asked the question because you have done research on how money or payments or remittances shape political life. Do you see money and payments as acting as a stabilizing force, or more of a pressure valve that prevents deeper change?
So this is actually my PhD dissertation. Currently, I got data from Lebanon. People who receives money. So here's the data what says, and I'm happy to share the data from you. People who receives money from Western European countries tend to be liberal countries, but also who receives money from United States, they tend to be against Hezbollah. They expressed to be against Hezbollah. Because I asked them, who did you vote for in the last elections? Where do you get money from? They tend to have a very liberal attitude, tend to have a very open-minded attitude because of where they receive the money from, which means they tend to connect to those people. They tend to share their ideas with them. In addition, I also found that people who receives money from abroad, they're more likely to engage in civil society organizations. They're more likely to engage in a protest. They're more likely to actually engage in anything not related to the government, because they do not trust the government. They do not trust that their vote is really going to produce something. And so they want to use their political voice somewhere else. And so they're going to engage in other ways to really change what they're going through, which is civil society organizations, which is protesting, which is really being active on social media. So what we can do is money can be used as a way to change the people's attitudes and the people's values toward these terrorist organizations, and to actually help the government really kind of, having a reform and having change in the government. And so this is a very important, because those remittances, 27% of Lebanon GDP relies on remittances. Syria economy right now relies on remittances. So this have power. And when we're talking about remittances, something that I really want to mention, people talk about money like being transferred, but there is also the ideas and the values and the norms that are being sent from people. Like when I'm sending money to my mother, I'm talking to her about what's going on here, how I'm living in the United States, and my values and my liberal values and norms. So this is also transmitting my values. Hence, she's less likely to be supportive of Hezbollah because of how I'm influencing her. And so this is the power of money that people don't really understand when sometimes or discuss about it when we talk about remittances.
Final question. Lebanon has been through war, collapse, revolution, and now what looks like a very slow burning crisis. Is there a scenario, Dania, you still see where Lebanon regains its footing, or are we in a new kind of normal?
My short answer is really when we disarm Hezbollah, when we fully disarm Hezbollah, we are very likely to really have back Lebanon, have the trust of the international community and foreign investors back in Lebanon, to be very honest with you. And this is not the normal. I think this is a transitional period for Lebanon. The disarming of Hezbollah and it's a transitional period. It might be a very long, sadly, a little bit to actually achieve it. It's difficult. Hezbollah has been in Lebanon for a very long time. But it's a transitional period to really build an actual government that people trust. Because recently I've heard from a lot of US officials, Gulf investors even, they're willing to go to Lebanon right now to invest in Lebanon and put the money and build the economy once Hezbollah is no longer in charge of the government or the institutions. So everyone is waiting for this decision to happen. So hence, this is why I say this is a transitional period. This is not forever. This is not the normal.
Dania, Craisi, thank you. That was clear, grounded, and exactly the kind of depth that we need right now in a simplified way.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and until next time.